All right, you ready to start? I am ready to start. This is part of what it's going to feel this way too. This is part of a lifetime work of talks, and it's a restatement of the teaching of the mysteries. And it's called Mystery Wisdom in Modern Thought. The mysteries and the mystery schools go all the way back into Atlantis, when we were first becoming self-conscious. And in our self-consciousness, we had lost touch with the gods. And we had lost touch with what we normally breathed as an understanding of the cosmos, of the spiritual world. We sort of took it for granted. It's almost like saying a dog doesn't have any doubts about God, and a dog doesn't have any doubts about the truths of the spiritual worlds, because the dog is not self-conscious, but the consciousness that is in the dog is living and experiencing all of the spiritual wisdom all the time. And so it just sort of takes it for granted. And so the mysteries were instituted in the times of Atlantis to meet the needs of those who were looking. In fact, the way it's often stated, it says that the mysteries date from the time when gods and goddesses walked among humans. But they weren't really gods and goddesses. But take everything that, if this is really hard to take, just take it all as a gigantic fairy tale, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and more fairy tale-like as we go on. Good idea. They weren't really gods and goddesses. According to the mysteries, there were beings that were here from Mercury and Venus who were taking care of part of their evolution as human-like beings. I guess the proper word these days is humanoids, by helping us out because we had gotten ourselves into such a terrible time with our evolution. We were set back, and the beings from Venus and Mercury helped us out, because humanity was divided into people of different temperaments. And some of the people required out-and-out rulership. And if you look back in the myths and histories of a lot of peoples, they talk about people who were born to be divine kings. Like in Greek times, they said you could always tell a person who was born to be a king because they had a little shock of purple hair. It may be true, I don't know whether it's so or not, but the divine kings was for people who needed authority and who appealed to authority. And the divine kings and the priests who had probably as much or more power in the lives of people than the kings were taught by the Venusians. But those who needed knowledge and those who needed intellectual understanding were taught by the Mercurians. And as a consequence, they were called the Mercurian or the Hermetic wisdom teachings of the mysteries. To this day yet, if you look at the caduceus of Mercury. It's the symbol of the medical societies. It's it's a staff with a sphere on the top, a winged sphere on the top, and this would be a black serpent, and this would be a white serpent looking at it, and their tails almost meet. And we'll talk about the symbol a lot later on. In fact, as long as we're telling fairy tale, I hope you don't mind being long, because tonight we're going to be tremendously long. All right, that's the moment. When it heats up, it goes past that moment where the element in there sets off.
It happened when you said we're going to be real long.
There's a story about the famous Theban seer called Tiresias, who was out walking one day with his walking stick, and he saw two serpents copulating. And he stuck his stick in between them, and immediately he remembered his past life as a woman. And a few years later, he was out walking again, and the same thing occurred. He saw two serpents intertwined, and he stuck his stick between them again, and he saw the life before that again when he was a man. And the way the myth goes of it, that Zeus and Hera were having an argument about who enjoys lovemaking most, the man or the woman. And they couldn't settle the argument, and they decided to have Tiresias settle the argument because they knew he remembered both lives. And they came and asked Tiresias, they took human form, and they asked Tiresias who enjoys lovemaking most, and Tiresias said, the woman enjoys it more than a man. And Zeus got tremendously angry and struck him blind immediately. But Hera was so pleased that she gave him insight, and he had spiritual vision ever after that. It's a really deep mystery myth, and there are a lot of things involved in it about remembrances of past lives, including the early part of this one as being part of the initiation into the mysteries, which we may get to yet in this talk. But the mysteries are schools of thought for understanding the fundamental mysteries of existence. They answer the big questions. The earlier talks in this course answered the questions like, what is a human being? What are we made of? What is the cosmos made of? And how do we grow, and how do things help us? And how do we help the universe? And in that early series of talks, the talks were directed to talking about the spiritual worlds and what we're composed of. We're composed of thoughts and emotions and desires and of energy to do things. And I'm trying to understand that in relation to the makeup of the cosmos itself. And we talked about things like rebirth and cause and consequence and karma. And we talked about clairvoyance and developing sensitivity to leave the body and such. And those were some of the early series of talks. The questions that were asked were, what is the purpose of our daily living? What are we made of? How do things work? Is there a moral justice? And above all else, the big question that always comes up with the mysteries is we have to know why things are as they are. And so this attempt in these series of talks is to talk about the mysteries from those who have lived through the mysteries. The mysteries are for people who have lived life more intensely. And as a consequence of living life more intensely, they have moved forward in evolution. They have unfolded powers and capabilities that are their own, just like in the same way that we can look at something or not look at it, or we can look at something and understand what it means. Some people have developed the ability to see other people's feelings, or some people have developed the ability to read the memory of nature, to know everything that has come before, and they've written this down. And they have associated together with each other in schools, and these are called mystery schools. And it's amazing, yes. Yes, this is going to be, if you think that's a lot of ground covered, we're going at a snail's pace now.
Yeah, but as you said, initiation, and you say people, I'm wondering about that word which about the number of years, what you meant by it, and what you mean by people starting schools, so like what the basis is of the schools. Are you going to get that?
That'll probably be another talks.
Would you just talk about it?
Yes.
Does people read the memory of nature and then they have a school because they do that?
No, that they find themselves of a common spirit, and they see what is happening, and they see the needs, and they collect together out of strength to utilize what they have found by science to help people. In a way, it is the spiritual equivalent almost of the American Cancer Society.
Not to bog down here, but I don't know. I mean, I look at a lot of organizations out there, and I don't know if I see that going on.
I don't think we see any mystery schools in the physical plane. We see representatives and expressions, outward formations, but we don't see the mystery schools actually. All right, all right, did you get the idea of what I'm talking about?
Well, because you're becoming elusive. Like when you say, well, they're not here, where are they?
I'm not.
I know all these theories about, the inner planes and all stuff, and such. Is that what it is? This is really a serious question.
I understand it's a serious question, but I'm going to evade it for now.
Okay.
I think you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're just touching down
I'm
on
just
things.
touching on things so that these three people don't have any idea at all. You and I have been going at it for just about 20 years. And we talk the same language and we ask hard questions of each other, but these people are not familiar. So I'm trying to do a very rapid familiarization. So at any rate, the ideal of the mysteries is that people can, by their own efforts, unfold spiritual powers within them that are not miraculous, but which are things that everyone is going to unfold. However, other people doing it for you does you no good. It's something that you have to unfold on your own within yourself. And so this is independent first-hand knowledge. What I'm going to be talking about is rather poor quality second-hand knowledge. We're going to be talking about what these people with their great understandings have written, what they have shared in various ways. And what I'm trying to do in these talks is understand it from my own understanding of what I see every day in life, from my own experience, from my own meditations, and put in a way that's useful and practical for us to apply in our own lives. So the whole idea is it's developed by independent experience, and then there is corroboration, and then there is technical application. this series, we're right in the middle of this series, and unfortunately I stopped about a year and a half ago, is another subset within the whole series. It's called Cosmology in Everyday Living. The subject of this course is cosmology cosmogony, anthropogenesis. If you like big words, I'll give you all kinds of big words, and then we'll talk about what they mean. Anthropogenesis. Cosmogony means the birth of the cosmos. It means the birth of the universe. Anthropogenesis means the birth and origin of human beings that we are. And so there have been a long number of, how many, do you remember, Dale, how many talks we've been in this already? Quite a few 2-hour talks. And we've taken the ideas from the mysteries, Eastern and Western, ancient and modern, with a special emphasis on the Western because it's more in touch with our kind of consciousness, because if I were to stand here and start talking about goat-headed people and things like that and symbols like that, this would really sound incoherent. And so what the idea is we're going to take the ideas or the principles as taught by the mysteries from the people who have experienced them by reliving them in their own individual memory. It is the idea of the mysteries that initiation, which is the becoming of a God, as the Bible says, know ye not that ye are gods. People who have taken the effort to develop the godlike powers within themselves have remembered. They have remembered not only this life, but previous lives and previous states of existence, going right back to the beginning of our solar cosmos. And their examination of it and what they find the purpose of it to be has been recorded. In fact, it's been recorded at numerous times in history. And as it has been studied and recorded, it is put forth for us, and that's what I'm going to be trying to do in this class. The second thing that that this class is going to do is to try to take the principles on the idea that we are miniatures of the cosmos, that everything that is in the cosmos is in us, and that we are, as we develop the powers in ourselves, of ourselves, we actually thrust out all of the influence of the universe and we become independent. And all of the laws, all of the powers that are in the universe are no longer in us, but we have the equivalent in ourselves, and we cooperate with them as a voluntary action. That is to say that we go on with we are then part of the creators. It isn't necessary, we aren't led around willy-nilly like the creatures, but as a free act of love, we participate in the divine creation as creators, and we do that freely of our own influence and drawing on ourselves rather than depending on the influences that come from us, be they astrological or be they of the gods or whatever. All right. Basically, then, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to study a huge, huge thing, And most of it has gone on already. So tonight will be a really difficult kind of talk. Because here I am restarting in the middle. I don't want to start in the beginning all over again, because it would not be a wise thing to go through all of that. This would be the third time. And get only so far and never be complete, because it's really, how would you say it? It's very frustrating and psychologically disappointing to do something like that. Sigmund Freud said that the source of neurosis is coitus interruptus. And Carl Jung claimed that one of the major contributions to psychological disorder is not feeling and experiencing things all the way through. A mystery student and teacher named Rudolf Steiner claimed that it was very unhealthy spiritual living to start something and not carry it all the way through. So we're left with a huge burden of how do I familiarize you with approximately 17 two-hour talks in a very big hurry. And so we're going to have a talk tonight where every subject, it's going to be very frustrating for Ron, because every subject that we may mention just in the passing of one sentence could be something that we talked about for hours. And we could develop it slowly and gradually. And I have done that. I have cassette tapes, but I don't want to talk as though I'm trying to commercialize them or sell them. I have cassette tapes that they're very nominally priced. They're $2 a piece. If you want to listen to everything that is going to be gone through in a recapitulation tonight, in fact, everything going all the way back to the early talks about what are the spiritual worlds and such like that. If you want to catch up, I can make you tapes and do that. You had a question or a statement.
So these 17 two-hour talks, is that the beginning?
Yes.
And so now you're starting with...
I'm going to start just about where I left off. I'm going to backtrack a little, but for the next two talks is going to be a recapitulation. And it's going to be a recapitulation very much the way Prokofiev wrote the Romeo and Juliet suites. He didn't write them first one and then the second, followed by the other, because he thought that would be artistically unpleasant. So what he did is he made them parallel. And so this meeting and the next meeting is going to be a recapitulation of the first half of cosmology and everyday living. The way it's going to work this time is I'm going to recap just some of the basic ideas and experiences and try to relive as it lives in my consciousness, or as it lives in my imaginative meditation. And then the next time we get together, I'm going to start all the way from the beginning again, only I'm not going to talk about the information, but I'm going to take then all of the principles which I have read in my notes. I'm going to take all the principles out and develop them in a fashion parallel to the development of time, and then we will start with the birth of the solar system and Atlantis and Lemuria, and talk about the spiritual interpretations of history and evolution in the last few million years, and then trail off into the future. So the way the course is set up is it's very vague in the distant past and in the distant future, but there's much more concentration on the times of a few 100 million years forward or back from our current time. Okay, so that is what we're going to try to do. First, we have to speak about the unspeakable. We have to speak about what has always been symbolized two ways. It's been symbolized by blackness or by silence. It sometimes, in a very unsatisfactory way, is symbolized by the zero, by the great cosmic egg. It is ultimate potential. It is what in Western terms is called the absolute. There are other terms for it, the void, all sorts of names. But none of the names can really describe it or say much about it, because it becomes paradoxical and nonsensical to talk about it. It is absolute truth, and it is absolute non-truth at the same time. There are whole schools of philosophy that are dedicated to the principle of absurdity just to get one to realize the connection with the absolute. In one rendition of Cosmology, it's described very poetically from words taken from Tibetan stanzas that say, "That which is and yet is not was." The absolute, various people have tried to describe it various ways, or various people have tried to not describe it in various ways, because you can talk about what it's not. In fact, it gets to a really difficult thing, because you have to, it's talked about, spoken of by denial. You can say, well, it's not like a sunrise, or it's not like an empty space. Or you can say it's like a space that's full of everything, but then when you focus on the presence of something, then the absolute nature is lost for the illusory consciousness of the presence. About the only characteristic that I know of that describes the absolute in terms of experientiability is the word consciousness. Even consciousness that doesn't know itself. You can talk about waking consciousness, you can talk about subconsciousness, you can talk about unconsciousness, or you can talk about superconsciousness. But even unconsciousness is consciousness. All that we experience, and even that which we suspect we don't experience, is a form of consciousness. Now, mind you, we're talking about very, very deep things. We're talking about things that our minds right now have little ability to grasp. It's something like what we've all done from one time to another. We've asked, what's the meaning of everything? And we hoped with our very limited human consciousness to understand the supreme meaning of things, which is not an easy task. We can't, with our little itty-bitty waking consciousness that we have now, possibly expect to understand a much deeper, a much more wide-awake consciousness, to say nothing of trying to sense the unconscious part of consciousness. Okay. Then there is something like a paradox. How does being come to be within the potential? How does all of this that we live in, how does this come into existence? And things like this, these puzzles that are difficult to solve, are called conundrums. And you can do this in just simple logic. In fact, in our century, one of the most brilliant minds of our century, who was a complete skeptic but was a mathematical logician, his name was Bertrand Russell. He tried to found all of mathematics in the basis of logic. And the whole conception of how to get from 0 to 1 in his famous work called Principia Mathematica, it took him several hundred pages and about a decade of his life to try to understand, just in the sense of mathematical logic, to say nothing in terms of being in the spiritual worlds, how things come into being out of the absolute. It's not getting something from nothing, because it was all there in potential and absolute, but it isn't there like there are things out there in the dark that if we just go and light them up, they're there. It's a very difficult matter. It's a hard thing to understand. There's something create that goes into it, but even that is a mystery, because the creative potentials and the creative powers that we have in ourselves are found in the absolute, and it's in our connection with the absolute that it comes to be. When I read the writings of various mystery writers, they state something like this. It's a circular argument unless you have the consciousness to live it into existence. Everything in the mysteries doesn't make any sense, or it's pale and it's insipid and it's dead until we put our own life into it. But the way the statements of mystery students go about this are something like this. There is the potential of conscious being, therefore it had to be. And so it was. Now that's really circular, but it's not too dissimilar from a mathematical principle, which the man on the street that hopes to win the lottery calls it the law of averages, that someday I have to win. In mathematics, it's called the principle of mathematical certainty. And in mathematical language, it goes, no matter how improbable something is, if you have an infinite set, the improbable event must occur. Yes. And so if you have eternal, just the potential of something being has to be. And once it is, it is. Now the peculiar thing about this in terms of the mysteries is that even though something of the potential has been brought to light, it doesn't do anything to in any which way change the darkness. It means there's that more that is light, and there's more that's alive, and more that's capable of being brought to life. But in the absolute, there's infinite potential. But there's also infinite impotential. So nothing has changed. And so the absolute has always been described as something that, though it doesn't intend so, or does it? It leads us on. It's like saying that we're never satisfied with what we create, but we still have to create. Because the more we create, the hungrier we get to have our creative urge fulfilled. All right. So this is now. This is going to sound like a rinky-dink numerology course. But once there is one being or one beingness, this in itself is universal. The way it's said in the ancient Hindu text is, if there were another as great as I, it were I. That even make a statement that spirit is all we need to say. It is. And the beingness of existence, or the beingness of spiritual being, just is, and everything is within that. If you want to look at it like mathematics, everything is divisible by 1. And everything is within 1. So we have now in our theogony, you might say, we have the unspeakable. Then we have something that is almost unspeakable. It is, and the name that is given to that is Supreme Being. These are very Western terms, but the same principle is everywhere. The unspeakable, if it is gendered at all, which is a foolish thing to try to do, the unspeakable is always gendered as feminine. I think that is something in the anthropomorphization of consciousness, with the fact that the feminine genitals are hidden, and that the creative process is hidden to our external visual sense, and that the whole idea of pregnancy and the expectancy of a new life, pregnancy means full of potential. And I think for that reason, the absolute has always been gendered feminine. The Supreme Being has alternated. Early on, the Supreme Being, like if you go way back into early China, for example, I'm talking just about post-Atlantean cultures now, the Supreme Being was always feminine. In modern times, the Supreme Being has been masculine, but is now seen in the, actually in the mystery myths, all of them are seen as both male, female, plus.
feminine that gives the birth, and to look at the Supreme Being as being masculine would be contrary to what is seen in nature.
I'm going to make a statement. It's not my own statement, but I would state with the other part would be the inverse of that would say that which gives life. It would say that the feminine principle grows, and it grows by receiving and drawing things to it, but it is the masculine principle that interjects and positively pours the life into it. And that is the argument that is given for the Supreme Being being masculine. Personally, I think that I do not myself, when relating to deity, unless deity is clearly gendered, I do not relate to it as you hear a lot of people talking about a being that we're going to talk about at a much lower level called God. Most people talk about God as a he. Even very strong feminists, you will hear them using God as a he. To me, it is a much holier word to me because it has both male and female and the potentiality of other kinds of attributes that can go beyond just a simple duality.
I would think on that level there is no definite distinction. It would be more of a melding of energies.
Yes. Not even a polarity. Yes. Okay. Now, this conscious Venus is aware of itself. It knows itself as being a consequence of potential. But there's something very insecure about being. Because being, even though it is talked about in terms of omnipresence and omnipotence and omnibenevolence and omniscience and all of those terms, it realizes it is, but it also realizes that it is not. And I don't want to put it in a human sense of neurotic unfulfillment, but there is an awareness of its root. It is a tree with invisible roots into the unspeakable. And this awareness leads to a consciousness that is reflected in the consciousness of Venus as a duality. What is knows what it is not, and that knowledge in what is leads to an internal division. And that internal division is an internal polarity. If you look in all of the early myths that talk about cosmogony and cosmology, always the gods and goddesses have counterparts. But the counterparts are both mates and consanguineous. They're brothers and sisters at the same time that they are mates. And that is to describe that this duality is within unity. But the duality is just a manifest statement of the awareness of known and unknown and past and could be future. And so how to say this? The one overseeing itself in internal division produces a child that is itself in three.
So are you saying that the two is the consequence of the one being self-conscious?
Of itself and not itself. And then conscious of itself as two gives birth to three. And it is logically unnecessary to carry that any further. And this is described in a lot of spiritual mathematics in curious ways. Like, for example, if you were to take one spot, maybe you should have brought up 3 tapes. He's going to need that one eventually. It's not an exercise I recommend, but if you look at one spot, especially a spot that's lively like a star, and try to do nothing but look at one spot, it just goes all over the place. You can't do it. What it does to your consciousness to look at that one spot, it's likely to jump anywhere. If you sit here for a long period of time, that's what will happen. In this case, it would most likely jump off this way, because either this way or that way. But since most people are looking about half this way, half that way, it's hard to tell. Because most of the illusions are things at the periphery of your consciousness are going this way, you'd most likely pull off this way or pull off that way. If you put 2 spots down, your consciousness will jump off in a line of parallels between the two. There are psychological tests that have tried to do this. But to hold your consciousness completely without jumping off either in a parallel line or jumping off anywhere, if you have 3 spots before you, you can do that. They've spent hours in psychology labs with this kind of thing. I'm sorry I can't cite papers, but it has been done. The point has often been signified as one-dimensional consciousness. But if the one happens to be everything, it's a pretty big point. In fact, it isn't even defined in terms of space. The extension of that to 2 points produces a line. But if you have 3 lines in our space, this is the only thing that defines, the birth of beingness into self is attained as an object of awareness in 3 in a way that is similar to that all potential space that is indicated by this blackboard is divided into the known space that is bounded by 3 lines versus everything that is outside of these 3 lines. The only way that you can define the full space of this blackboard, or any part of the full space of this blackboard, is with 3 lines. If you just have 1 line, it goes on ad infinitum in plane space. If you have 2 lines, they cross, but relative to 1 point, you have a reference, but you still haven't objectively defined an area of space, or you haven't defined a self, non-self in manifest being until you have 3 lines. I'm going much more detailed than I want to go because it's unbelievable the amount that we're trying to cover here. But we're going all right. In fact, if we have a point and turn that point into a line and then turn those 2 lines and put them together, we have the other ancient manifestation of the 3 definers of existence, the point, the line, and the circle, because then these 2 lines act like the And in this case, the circle is representative of a perfect enclosure space in a two-dimensional sense.
And would the line be the light that comes out?
Yeah, that's it, precisely.
I don't understand the...
Yes. Only it's crossed in such a way that you can use it as a compass. All right. Now, these three, the three lines or the three dots or the three qualities that are associated with beingness fulfilling itself in a triad, they are called attributes. Because when we're talking about being, we're not talking about a proper appellative. We're saying that being is no limitations. And therefore, you have to speak about something as an attribute of something that is infinite in character. And so each of these qualities, this is sort of like the mystical doctrine of Trinity, which we're whipping through rather swiftly. In the beginning of all creation, things pass by this seemingly arbitrary state of knowing the possibility of being to be. And when it becomes, it has three attributes because there's a logical fulfillment. The first attribute is always associated with power. And it is just essential being or essential beingness. There isn't even any visibility about it. In fact, if you look back in the early renditions of spiritual mathematics, they have triangles all over the place, but the highest triangle, that which symbolizes the supreme being in its relation to the absolute, the top of the triangle is always open, because there is being, doesn't even have to, in its simplest essence, doesn't even have to be visible. It just is. And it has all of the power of the absolute that it can have in the manifest. And this is like meaning. Meaning without meaning about something. Some people use a different term for it. Truth. The second attribute in the West is called word.
These are attributes of what? The supreme being?
Yes.
Okay. In relation to the triangle?
In relation, yes. Yes. And the word is how the invisible meaning is universally manifest. And in the same way that the power is assertive, the word is receptive. You remember that the two was a consequence of the one being aware of what it was not, and that being aware of what it is not, the two is then reflected back to the zero. It's like the even numbers all reflect back to the zero. And I said a whole bunch of things that go to whip by very quickly. And therefore, there is in the two since it is born out of the recognition of the one in contradistinction to the unspeakable, it has some of the characteristics of the unspeakable, and that the infinite potential of the unspeakable is manifest as pure imagination. And these two powers, the power of direct manifestation versus imagination, they work together. That is to say that it's hard telling whether the will forces the imagination into shapes or whether the imagination draws the will out. They're both attributes of the same thing. Now, in a sense, the conception of the one being multiplied in the manifestation, they talk about things like, oh God, it's going to be hard to talk. I want to talk a lot about all of these things, but we've only got so much time, so we just have to breeze by. They have what mystics have what is called cosmic root substance, which is made up of infinite points that have location. And this substance can become anything. And these points are not atoms, but they're like points, but they use the word atoms, which is a very unfortunate choice of words. And these points in the consciousness of the one, we're getting down to something now near phenomenal. These points are drawn into the awareness of being or non-being by the imagination. And this is to say that what is going to become manifestation, all of the points of space that are in that are conceived in the imagination of the Word. That's good enough there. And the third attribute is associated with motion. And in the same way that meaning is born in words, when a word becomes actualized, in the same way that the one is born in knowledge of itself through the divisive process, this is called name. So this is the name of the Supreme. Yes?
I can understand power and imagination in motion. Do you mean word as in a written word or word as in a sound?
More like if you have the definition of a word in a dictionary, then the word itself is unnecessary. The word is the form or what carries it. But both of what you say.
Behind it?
Yes. But what you say about the carrying power of word as sound, that is also true. See, what we're talking about is something we should be spending hours and hours and hours with.
I'm just trying to follow it.
Yeah.
Carrying power of motion?
Is the carrying power of power is carried through the word and it's carried into the motion. Like in the ancient mysteries, this was unmoved. And this conceived the idea of motion. And this set things into motion. This is the willer, this is the atom tilter, and this is the spinner. Like in ancient Hindu mythology, the atoms get set up. Actually, if you look at all of even the ancient Tibetan, the atoms get set up and they're set spinning by the third part. All right. What we're talking about here as heavy as it is to conceive, and I like the fact that all of you are having thoughts and realizations as we're talking about this, because it shows that we may not be many, but I'm happy that the people are here that are here, because it is people who are engaged in metaphysical kind of thinking. I like that. But all of what we're doing, you might say, is petty, trite, and trivial. Because relative to our consciousness now, the experience of this, that of all the many millions and millions of humans that are among us that manifest and remanifest, the people who have had the capability of experiencing this at this level and reliving this even in reflection are very, very few. The highest of our spiritual experiences is many levels below this. I'm going to just quickly do some mathematical, logical, spiritual trickery. But in the same way that the one in relation to the unspeakable or to the unknown gives birth to the two, and in seeing itself in the two really sees three, this principle of seeing itself within the two to become the three is itself a universal principle on itself. It's the principle of division within, so that when the three see themselves with regard to the unknown, when the three sees itself with regard to the unknown, it becomes 6 around the 7th. I don't know how to say that.
What do you mean by 6 around the 7th?
I'll try to explain it very quickly. I'm going to whip it by you really quickly because we have to move on or we'll be here literally until midnight. The 3 attributes are now known. But there is the potential then of other 3 that are unknown, that may have qualities that can be known within the potential. And the known reflected through the unknown manifests a 3 unknown. And this has always been symbolized as the symbol of the macrocosm, where there is the 3 known versus the 3 unknown, focused through the center of darkness, which is the 6th around the 7th. This, there are lots of pretty analogies. You've seen it with beams of color or with circles of pigment, where you'll have colors that will be the primary colors, and they will overlap each other. And then you will have the primaries out here, and at the overlaps you will have the secondary colors, and in the 7th you will have the blending of all colors, which is sort of an indigo-like color. And this is the birth, so to speak, of the manifest 7. So, all right, we were whipping through this very swiftly, and it needs to be that way. Now, again, once we have carried out 1, 2, 3, we didn't have to carry it out 1, 2, 3, 4. We could, but it isn't a necessity. It's a different kind of logic when you go into that. And then the same thing, the 1, 2, 3 reflected across itself into the 6th around the 7th. you know that it's a true point that if you take 6 circles, all of the same type, same diameter, that's the most you can get around the 7th. You can't get 5 or 8. They're all just touching each other and packing them close to each other in plane space. It's always 6 around the 7th. In 3-dimensional space, when as you do with little balls, it's always 12 around the 13th. But that's another. I don't want to get too many things in, or it'll get to be too much. So once you have reproduced 3 across the center to produce 6 or 7, that's all that's necessary for that, because to repeat it again and again, you're always repeating the same thing. It's a logical redundancy, and the simplest explanation of it is one replication. Now that is important, because the manifest 7, as developed through this, you realize what we're talking about here. We're talking about numbers as symbols, and that these symbols represent the logic of the Supreme Being. Though our understanding of them is very meager, it's very feeble right now, or else we would be creative powers. But this is literally, at least according to the mysteries, the way cosmos comes into being. On one hand, it is a mathematical, logical kind of consciousness that coming into existence has to be like this. You could say it's arbitrary. From the viewpoint of the unspeakable, it's arbitrary. But it's more than that. When you have the 7, you have the 7 colors. You have a manifest complete. And this replication works always through the 2, which is the division within. Which means to say that within the oneness, there are divisions within, and divisions within divisions, and divisions within divisions. And that these divisions, in the simplest level, are usually called the given terms like cosmic planes. And these internal divisions and the full spectral experience within them, with each division within a division, there's more room for variety. There's more room for deviation from this very simple 1, 2, 3, 6, 7 kind of consciousness. All right. What we have done is we have talked about what in the book of Revelations are the 7 unspeakable words. They represent planes of existence that are currently beyond our experience. And within them are subplanes, until finally, going down a few levels of subplanes, don't ask me how many, I don't know, cosmic planes and cosmic subplanes, we come closer to home. And we come to a being that is the source, the object, the goal, the purpose, the reason for our existence as we know ourselves now. And this being, like all other self-conscious beings, is a triune reflection of the Supreme. What applies to the Supreme applies to a measure in the being in which we currently exist and take all of our meaning. It's something like an analogy. Our consciousness both wide awake and not wide awake, because most of what we do every day, the way we spend most of the energy in our body is asleep. Most of the caloric energy that we spend in our body, we spend maintaining the potassium-sodium balance. I think it's something like between 85 and 90% of all of the energy that we burn in our bodies is maintaining a sodium-potassium balance. Weird. We don't even know what's going on. Like when we're digesting our food, we don't know that we're digesting our food. But you might say that we are God to the organs and even to the cells of our body. And when we bend all of our energies to one end, that is like the creative purpose of God to all of us. But if you wanted to expand it, and if you wanted to say that God, which in a very physical sense is associated with our solar system, has its existence within the Milky Way galaxy, our relationship to God and to the galaxy is something like God's relationship to the Supreme Being. It's an analogy, and it's a very, very lightweight analogy, but it is of that order. We won't go into talking about the threefold aspects of God, because that will come out in the course of what we're talking about. And this being is the creative work, internal and external, of this being, the creation that we live in, is what we're going to be talking about in the course of these talks. And tonight we're going to hammer out about 40% of it. But it's, as you can see, we're going to have to go very swiftly because we're probably through one tape already, huh? Just about, huh?
1 hour, 13 minutes.
Oh! We may have to stretch this into 3 sessions. I hate to do that. All right, that's all right. I'll leave this up here. Now, write down. It's going to be late for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
You'd rather stretch it into 3 sessions.
Sure.
All right, I'll find a reasonable break point. Is that all right if we stretch it into 3 sessions? Okay. He's got to drive to Marshfield yet tonight.
The last 2 times I was ready to come, and then somebody visits me, like the plumber. It takes 20 minutes, and I ask him for an appointment. I don't know what meeting I had.
Try your patience. Did you lose your spiritual equipoise?
He derailed.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, I think I'll find a break point here fairly quick. I'm going to give you a brief, it's sort of a composite statement that I've pulled out from several places. At the beginning of a solar manifestation, God, I guess I should, unified collective spirit limits itself to an appropriate portion of space. Elected for a new evolution of added objective self-consciousness. This is something that's worthy of many, many hours of meditation. This is the kind of thing that is given to you in a mystery school as something to do in your morning meditation. That when you first wake, without even opening your eyelids, if you can put your consciousness on a formula like this and experience it and sink yourself into it, you can actually come to remember the experience, and you can actually come to bring it into your daily life with waking consciousness. Because that's what this is all about. We cannot become God unless we live the truth of God more wide awake in our daily lives. And this sort of thing does it. Every word, every word in here is loaded, including the capitalization. Well, this should be capitalized. You. But there are three words that I want to take out. Because they talk about the basic three things that are important. You might say this phrase right here, but especially this word. Time. This word. Space. And a combination of these three words. These are three of the primary attributes of the potential that is made actual by God in the evolutionary process. And God, as a unified collective spirit, includes us, as well as every atom of dirt, and as well as the stuff of every of our imaginations or every of our spiritual impulses. Humans, every form of life is part of the unified collective spirit. It is both a creation and in evolution, something that we'll talk about. But we're talking about three states. We're talking about time, space, and evolution. You might even say, you might just take the evolution of consciousness away and erase that all together and put up one word that would answer it all. Change. Time, space, and change. This whole activity literally is analogous to a day for us. We wake up to a new day, and it is new. We may have had plans. We may even have had dreams about what we wanted to do while we were sleeping. And so the plans carry over from the past, but there are always the unexpecteds, the unknowns that becomes part of the creative process. In the same way that we talked about the unknown of the absolute being an objective reality, and that unknown gets frozen into being. The time and space are actually like the open gap of the original triangle. They are potentials. It's like where we realize the unknown and where we take something that could be and bring it into existence. So time and space are potentials. And time gets filled with the active, with the known. It gets filled with spirit. Space, in relation to the focus of spirit into the potential of unknown or the potential of ignorance, space bears the relationship that solidifies ignorance as matter. And eventually, spirit in working through time into matter becomes materialized. And matter, or the ignorance out of the potential of space in time, is spiritualized. So that matter and the ignorance becomes part of the spiritual awareness, and the spirit digs into the unknown and knows itself in an unknown new potential in the process of matter. Okay. It's very, very heavy material. This is called the spirit-matter pole. Different cultures have different names for it. In India, this is called the Purushra Prakriti. And then when you see this on the cosmic level of the Supreme Being, this is, I don't know, Maulo Prakrito. I think, you remember how to spell Maulo Prakriti? I forget what the superset of Purushra is. And somewhere there is a neutral middle here. And what we're talking about is in our solar manifestation, in terms of matter, the different sevens in the spirit-matter pole, this is the same duality that we talked about before, are described in the following fashion. I'm whipping something by you that's, I think I spent a half a year at it in the first series of lectures. That's where we're coming to right now. That's precisely what we're coming to. Where we spend most of our existence right now is called the dense. I'm just blocking the door so you don't get out. The dense physical. That's this stuff. But actually the dense physical is subdivided. Actually subdivided into 7 parts. Solids, liquids, gases, and 4 different kinds of energy, which are called etheric energy. And some people call it ki and all of that. Prana, and all of those names are names that talk about the energies. So this is broken into the chemical, solids, liquids, and gases, and the etheric. So what we're saying is, in the world, there is a physical stuff, and in that physical stuff, there is an etheric energy. And in some beings in the world that we see, there is a physical being, and inside of that is a life energy that allows it to move and to grow and to experience through energy perception. Beyond the physical world is called the desire world, which is again stratified into 7 different parts. The 7s are reproduced, and the 2s are reproduced, and the 3s are reproduced, but we're not going into that because we're not in a course of spiritual psychology, because we could be, and we could look into material that, if advertising agencies ever fully appreciated all of the knowledge of the desire world and the principles that work in the what is sometimes called the astral body or in the aura, if they understood they understand quite a few of the principles in sort of a instinctual gut fashion, they could really be a menace to us. The desire world is where every time we feel emotions, every time we have inner feelings, or every time we have the impulse of desire to be outward, to do something or to take something in, that's a world. And that's a world that's made up of desire stuff, just like this world is made up of physical stuff. And we have a vehicle and, you might say, organs of perceiving that we can perceive desires. You don't see it with this kind of an eye. You see it with the eye of desire itself. Usually very refined, poetic types of people that get into all kinds of gradations of feeling, or great composers that get into all of these different realms of feeling, they often unfold perception of the desire world. Then there is the world of thought. That is to say, not only do we have the motivation to move and to have experiences in the material world, but we have a reason for it. And this is subdivided again into 2 great halves, one being concrete thoughts, definite thoughts. That chair is blue, that chair is stable. Therefore, I can be blue and stable if I sit in that chair. The other is ideational thought. This is the center between, in all of our experience, this is the center between phenomenal, complete experiences and universal experiences. The ideational thought is what we've been dealing with tonight. We've been dealing with ideas that are completely universal. There is no end. You can describe them in a formula, or you can tell them like a story, but they're universal ideas. In that little story, it expands through the whole universe. It's not like a concrete thought that chair is there, and if I try to walk through here tonight in the dark, I'll stumble over that chair. That's very concrete. That's very real. Or that person is suffering sorrow because that person needs to let go of something in their consciousness. That's very concrete. In the ideational thought, these are all things that we have vehicles for, and we can unfold the clairvoyance to see. Some people can see with the ear of God, and they can hear thoughts. Not with this kind of ear, but it's an internal ear. And some of those thoughts are like an entire lifetime is one thought, a very complex thought that has many sub-thoughts. And when people read past lives, they're actually doing it by tones. Very much in the same way that Mozart could hear an entire symphony in the flash of a second. It was a whole. Well, he didn't know how to break it up sometimes, so he had to do random things. What he would do, when he had such a thought, he could hold a thought like that for a long time, even though it came to him in an instant. If he needed to break up that thought and get a way to get into it, you know what he would do? He would sit at a pool table and he'd bounce the ball around. And when he saw the combination of the ball bouncing around, he took that as a theme or a way to delineate that which was whole and complete. All right. And the ideas overlap each other, and there's the idea of roundness and the idea of, all of the mathematical principles. Idea that we ever have, and this is where there's somewhat of a difference between East and West. The chief idea that we have is the idea of self, and if we really refine that idea, it's the idea of self as God, as Spirit. So in the East, especially the Buddhists, they say that the self is only an idea. The West would say it's an idea, but it's not only an idea, that it's a wonderful thing. You see what we're saying? We're saying that the physical, the etheric, and the emotional form a phenomenal triad. And then we're saying that the ideational self and then what comes after that is the life spirit. If we take the idea of self, that is born within selfness. And that selfness is the realm of life spirit. Or if we take the idea of color, that color can only exist within light. And this is the realm of light. We're getting tired. I can see it. I can sense it in my body, so we're going to break off fairly quickly. But I want to describe the rarity and the magnitude of this. Sometimes when we do things out of pure love, we do things out of the goodness of our heart, we have an altruistic impulse that goes beyond our emotions and feelings. If we have that supreme transcendent experience that is called in the West, this is the realization of self as God, is called samadhi, Savalkalpa samadhi in the Orient. In the West, it's called the baptism by the Holy Spirit. But when we have an experience of the life spirit, which very few people have ever, and momentarily, it is the experience of universal light, not just the light of the ethers or the desire world or of our thoughts. You're out of your mind, even your ideational mind, and you're in a realm of pure love that goes at least to the extent of the solar cosmos. That is called the experience of Christ in the Western world. Beyond that is an experience or a world that is called the divine spirit. And that is where our relationship to the power of will that holds everything in existence is found. Beyond that are states of virginity in a virgin spirit, and beyond that is called the world of God. If we look at these things from the view of space and matter, these are called worlds, or they're called realms. If we look at them from the time-spirit point of view, they're called states of spirit. This is what we live in. This is possible. All of these realms are possible for us, even within this lifetime, to experience and to manifest. Saint Germain, the great occultist of Europe, was known to say, in the same way that God can take the stuff of space and create new, I can. He was talking about the ability to draw from the realm of life spirit and to bring in entirely new ideas and bring in new things into creation. This is something that is possible to us. But I just want you to know that it's very, very, very rare. Sometimes we only get a reflection of an echo of something like the life spirit. Sometimes we're altruistic. And we really, I had it happen just last Sunday. I was at a gathering of people, and I was feeling very altruistic, and I was beaming love. And this total stranger came up to me, shook my hand like he knew me, like he was an old friend and such like that. If you'd asked him where he knew me from, he wouldn't have known. But he recognized that which is normally only experienced in friendship. Where you sense the spirit, that you have a long enough interaction to know what's behind all of that ego stuff. And even beyond the mind, you have the sense of love that is there. So this spirit-matter pole, the realms, the states of spirit, and the metamorphosis of consciousness into the ignorance of matter and back into the awareness of spirit is going to be the ground for what we talk about for the solar creation. And we'll cover the first 40% of the solar creation the next time we get together 2 weeks from tonight. And then the third recapitulation, what we will do then is pull out all the principles, and we'll try to be very, very practical. And that's amazing for me. It's exciting for me to go back to the principles each time, because it's something that you can use in everyday life. Thank you very much for sitting through this, because this was a heavy-duty kind of talk. No, that isn't necessary. The fact that everybody is still wide awake, and the fact that everybody had an engaging thought in here, that means a lot to me. Boy, it really, I can't tell you how much that means to me to not just stand up here and be talking, but the fact that people are eager to dive in. I like that.
So you like it when people interject, because
interject or question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. See, Ron, I'm sorry I had to cut Ron off before, but his questions were going off at a different angle from where I was trying to get to. It's not that I won't. I'm going to give you the theory, and I'll give you my own experiences and such like that. But and I don't want to deny the question, but it just didn't seem appropriate in the time frame. He and I'm sure we're sort of like Gnostic brothers from a long time. We've been arguing not as though we're enemies, but as though we're adversaries in the spirit. It's like in a drama, you can't have a good play unless each person plays their part, and one part may be a counterpart to another, and they may be both working to the same end of the same play.
I don't know if
Okay.
It's just an honest question.
Sure. I agree.
But to have a
Initiation
counterpart,
stuff, we have to get to that.
Yeah, we will.
but by having a counterpart, we can both have more clarity.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Do most of the people here know this stuff already? Because
All of these three people have these three people are familiar at least with the terms. But certainly you've thought, and every time you've thought, you've been in the region of thought, you've had ideas, right? You've worked with a principle of a formula, or you worked out a geometric theory and you had a eureka, right? You understood that theorem. You proved it for yourself. That's an ideational thought experience. And certainly with your rising sign, you've had emotions and feelings, right? No. You have to.
No, but some of the things you went over, you were going at such a speed that I was wanting to go, wait a minute, what about this? Because I wanted to clarify certain points so I could see it.
Yes. Yeah, that's why I said that this would be.
So a lot of it just kind of went over the dam for me.
Yeah. But mind you, that just in talking about the spirit-matter pool, I think I have something like at least 10 hours worth of lectures, introductory lectures into all of that. Like right now, for the realm of life spirit, I could have said that every time you have an intuition, not even a thought, but just a pure intuitive impulse, that's coming from the realm of life spirit. See, when not with this kind of light, but when you see through something and you say, aha, there is another kind of light that is a light of truth, and that light of truth embodies your idea, and that light of truth that embodies your idea is the light that is from the life spirit. So it's something that everybody experiences, even no matter how vaguely we experience it. But we're going to talk about states of existence where we lived in that, unconscious though we may have been. You looked like you were just about to propound the question.
No, I realized my neck was too far this way.
All right. We will meet 2 weeks from tonight, and this one will meet every 2 weeks because that 1 week that I go to California won't fall in the sequence of this class. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I find I learn better dialogue